Hi crafters, this is Raquel from Paintsandglitter and I welcome you to my channel. Today I'm coming along with my memory book inserts from Tonic Studios. I'm going to be sharing with you a comprehensive tutorial using these inserts along with a trove of locks and vintage vignettes. So if you want to stick around, I'm going to share with you how you can use all of these supplies to make a beautiful memory book and just some different options. So starting here with the hanging postal pockets. As you can see, they have a little hole. You could thread a ribbon through if you would like to. The inserts are already there available for you. Those measure 2¼ inches square, and they have the little oval sides, and also the little envelopes measure 2�3/8 by 3�3/4. There's the magnetic photo wallets. There's 2 per pack, and as you can see here, they do come with the little sides that open up, and then there is the insert that reveals itself as an accordion. You can decorate these with photos, stamping, journaling, or just decorate them with pretty papers. And they have the pretty little heart there. So cute. Next is the photo affection pockets. There's 2 per package, and these are heart-shaped with a little tag that has that little hole already on there, so you can again string some ribbon through it, and the little heart in front is a little smaller than the one in the background. Next, there's the sliding photo pockets. These are one of my favorites. There's 2 per package. They look like little Polaroids to me, but they have that nice large square aperture, and I thought this would be perfect for instance, sharing recipes, and I thought that maybe you could print out the recipes and use that little insert as a template and cut them out and share them with friends. Next is the photo cascade wallet. I'm going to be sharing with you how to adhere this onto your book, but essentially you'll use those 2 little flaps on the back. You need to get this paper ready to move, so you'll be manipulating this, and the one portion you see me pulling on there that has that little slit is what will allow you to actually pull that paper so that you can get the movement. This is a really fun kinetic portion that you can add to any mini album or card. It allows you also to add the little photos with the little side inserts there. And what I really like about these inserts from Tonic Studios is that they do come with the little acetate template. So these you're going to have to prepare, and I'm going to show you here. What you need to do is decide whether you want to use it in a portrait or horizontal fashion on your photo, of course, and then you will need to mark it with a pen or marker. However, you do need to poke out the little holes there because that is acetate. Sometimes the little circles stay behind, so be sure to poke those out, and then that way you'll be able to use this over and over, and you don't need to necessarily only use it on photos. So this is a lot of fun to use in your memory books to mark little locations for things. But once you've done so, of course, you can line this up perfectly with your paper cutter. As you see here, I'm just gauging the distance there by just looking at the little dots, and then this way you can accurately cut out your photos for the inserts. And there are a total of 2 different inserts that have these little acetate markers, or templates is what I should call them. So that's one. And if you see how easy now the photo will fit right in there, that's my little boy, the baby. So that is how easy you can use that. And next is the hanging photo strips. So these are really fun as well. It also comes with a different size template. This is a little bit of a film strip here where you can select as many photos as you like. There's a total of 4 apertures. You would then adhere that shut, and this fits inside of this larger sleeve, and it is quite snug, so I'm going to advise that you test it out first to get that paper used to folding or being manipulated, and then that'll fit right inside. So let's get started. We're going to start with the hanging postal pockets. Now I'll be using a total of 2, as you see here. I've gone ahead and traced it onto a sheet of paper from Vintage Vignettes, and all I did was place it on top trace around it and cut it out so that way it'll fit just as an insert into this little envelope. I'll later be poking that little hole out. I'll be using a crocodile, but if you have a regular hole puncher, that will do. So I'm going to adhere this onto the little envelopes, as you see. And as you see there also on your screen, I have the vintage vignettes rub-ons, and those are transfers that you can also get with the collection. If you bought the bundle, of course, at March Madness, then you'll already have these on hand, but these you can cut apart to your heart's content and use on any one of your inserts. Today I'm using this little postage image one, so I did take a scrap sheet of paper to place inside of the little envelope. That way I only transfer the portion that I want. You can position that, and it does come with a little tongue depressor, and all you have to do is rub onto that until it transfers the image fully, or whichever portion you like. You can then remove the carrier sheet, and there's a little portion there that did come off, but that's okay. It got most of that image on there. And now I'll be poking that little hole, as I mentioned before, by using the smallest little hole punch from the crocodile. And if you don't happen to have that in your stash, you can certainly just use a stylus. So here is the largest page that you can cut out using a Trove of Locks. I've used smooth ivory card from Tonic Studios and also used the die to cut out the little holes on the side of the page. Then the largest matting layer, so all of the pages will be that size. I've also used the larger square-ish looking die from this set. I've taken a piece of chili red card and folded it in half. Now this is about 5 inches wide, so you can also cut down your paper if you'd like to. And what's important is that you place the die on the fold of your page, matching that one edge that will not cut. I've also used that other die there and run it through the machine just to get that texture that looks like a crackle finish. And it does come with a second die that will cut out the matting layers. I'll be using the ones you see here. And I'm also using a piece of silver vellum from Tonic Studios, and I'm ripping it apart here using a ruler, as you can tell. And this is just fun. It's to create a hidden pocket on the page, but it's also a landing place for the little envelopes because the background is quite busy, as you can tell, with the florals, and I wanted it to have a soft little area there so that it wouldn't compete with the images on the layers on the envelopes, and I hope that makes sense. But all you have to do is fold this over. There's no real right or wrong way to do this. It's just a strip of paper, whichever one you like. I happen to love vellum, so I'll be using that. Adhere it to the top and bottom of that matting layer, and now you see there's a little landing place for those envelopes, and I'm adding a second piece of rub-on here. These are the tulips, and I think they're absolutely gorgeous. So I do hope that Tonic Studios comes out with even more rub-ons for us to use in our card making, our memory books, because I think they're darling. So here are the matting layers I had spoken about, and I wanted to let you know that this is not a square. I discovered that the wrong way. So be sure to test out that die before you cut out the papers in case there's anything directional that you want to focus on with your images. So what we'll be using from a Trove of Locks along with that little insert is also the little heart-shaped dies. So I did cut out 2 hearts with glitter card from Tonic Studios, and you just saw me using the acetate from one of the inserts there, and I've layered it onto that heart just so that I know where the little hole portion will be. So I'm using some low-tack tape from Craft Perfect, and I'm sorry if I have difficulty saying that, but it's English is not my first language. So in any case, I'm using that little portion of that acetate. I'm placing the heart on top, and that's because I'm going to be poking a hole in the little hearts, as you see here. And I also pencil marked using that little template the page, because where you see the 2 dots there, that's where I'll be placing the 2 hearts so that they lock this portion of the page onto the background. So now I can adhere this and I hope that that was easy to understand. But once I have the location of the little hearts, then I'll know how to lock the page down with the hearts. And for that, by the way, you will need two little eyelets. You just thread them through the little holes in that little heart, place them toward the back of the page, and then open those. And then this will hold down the little hearts and also allow you to move them. Now, you're seeing just a simple glitter card here, but I did go back and take them off and then add two more little hearts that I adhered layered together that are cut out of 300 GSM. So I'm sorry that I didn't include that on this tutorial, but I do recommend that you always layer multiples so that they're nice and sturdy. So here I'm stamping one of the little envelopes again. I just decided that I wanted to add a little bit more here, and this is just an old Prima stamp that I happen to have in my stash, and it has some writing on it, and it barely even transferred the entire thing, but I'm quite happy with it because it matches everything else. And I've threaded some twine in the little holes of these little envelopes, and I've taken some little jewelry findings that I have in my stash. They happen to be a key and a locket, and I thought that would be so cute to add here. And all you have to do is fold your twine in half, and the portion that is folded is what you will feed through the little hole of the envelope. Take the tails and pull them through, and that's as easy as that. And now you can decorate the little loop that has been created. So I just take a little circle here, and I don't know anything about jewelry, so other than wearing it. So I just loop that through, and I then add the charm, and then I close it. And I know there's words and names for all of these things. I just don't memorize them, but now I'm just adhering the little envelopes together because I don't want them to move. I just want it to have the look of movement. And now I'll adhere this to the back, taking those little tails and just pulling them to the back of the page, and using double-sided adhesive from Craft Perfect, I can add that to the little envelopes as well as the loops, so that way I can adhere these onto the page and they'll stay exactly where I want them to. I can see the pretty little charms, I can see the lockets, just everything. And now I'm just cutting away the tail portions because I don't want any bulk here. And the last thing that I'll do is also add a little bit of adhesive over the little endings of the eyelets. So this is our first page, and this will go right on top of that ivory card. And we'll move on now to the photo affection pockets. We're also going to alter these. What I've done is I've opened one. I took a metal spatula and ran it right through that edge. I was able to separate it, trace it onto this gorgeous vellum from Tonic Studios, and now I just fussy cut around it, as you can see. And these Tim Holtz scissors are my absolute favorite. They have the spring-loaded action, and I don't always mention the tools per se, but I have to say that if you're going to fussy cut, it's worth it to have a comfortable pair of scissors. As you can tell, I'm left-handed and I'm able to use those just fine, and they're just really easy to use and you can get a lot of precision, so that's, I think, worth repeating. So here all you have to do is fold this right back in the same position as it would have been, and I did cut away a tiny little portion there, but this is now perfect for using in your book. So don't think that you're limited to the white cardstock. So long as you can trace paper, you're good to go, and you can, I hate to say it, but sacrifice one of the inserts if you need to, so that way you can get the precise measurement if you would like to do it as I have done so here. And here I'm adding a little rub on again. This is a rose image right onto that beautiful vellum heart shape, and a little bit did not transfer, but that's of no consequence. What I'll be doing on this now is taking the Nuvo glue pen, and these are available in several sizes. This is the thinnest and also the newest pen that you can get from Tonic Studios, and it's just like writing anything else instead of ink. However, you do have adhesive. Let it air dry a tiny bit, allow it to get nice and tacky, and now you can use any foils that you may have. This pink one happened to come in a kit from Tonic Studios, so they do have the foils in gold, silver, there's a chrome color, there's a red, and also an emerald green, and those you can get outside of the kits, but be on the lookout for any future kits that may also include more foil, because a little bit goes a long way. And as you can see, all you have to do is place it right on top of the adhesive and press onto it. I did go back and add a little bit more right in the center, and I just love the effect of it. It's this very subtle shine with that little bit of color, but it just adds such a delicate, pretty color, and I was really happy with that. And there's the result. So now I'll just be able to fold over that little tab again, close that little heart, and I'll be able to use this in the book. Now, I did mention that I would be using a second heart, and what I've done is that I've taken a media mat along with some Nuvo embellishment mousse, and what you see me shaking here is a bit of Mica Mist. It happens to be in the color Aspen Gold. I'll be writing down the names of the mousse I'll be using in this book in the description bar of this video, but as you can see here, you can go ahead and color the paper using that mousse and also mix and match with any other water-based medium you may have. In this case, I'm mixing it with that Aspen Gold, and I'm also dipping it right into that Mica Mist, so that way I get a variegated look. Once that is dry, I also traced around the tag portion of those little hearts, and I cut away the little portion that would have had the little hole in it and created some matting layers. Now, as far as the tag, I'm just taking a 3mm wide white ribbon, and you can thread that right through to decorate those as well. And I'm just cutting those down a tiny bit. And Tonic Studios does have 3mm and 9mm wide ribbon. So I did the same with the vellum heart, just creating an insert. And then as far as these little tags, I did take a Nuvo marker and also a white gel pen and just drew around the perimeter. So here I'm using for this page the same size large matting layer, the same size insert square that you can cut out, and I cut it in half or folded it in half, and then I'm using this little die here that cuts the little slits on the corner. So you do have to run this on your paper 4 times, and that way you can insert a photo. And this is the second lock we'll be using. All you have to do is adhere this little tab onto your page. I'll be covering the rest of it with this beautiful matting layer that has that pretty rose. It's like a cabbage rose, and that will go right on top. And onto that little tab, you can adhere a small magnet and cover it up with a second piece of card. Now you see there, I did cover it up with a decorative portion, sorry, but I'll be actually changing that. What's important here is that you flip the paper over and add your second magnet to the back. That's what I had done there, and add a piece of adhesive to tack down that tiny little magnet. And now here you can position the little hearts on your page. I'll be adhering them in a topsy-turvy way, and I'm also going to be adding little leaves and florals and other little items and ephemera, but I'm only going to show this portion here for now. And this is from Little Birdie. So Little Birdie flowers are available at the Tonic Studios US website, and you can cut these down if you would like to. You can manipulate them as you see here, and I just thought it would be so pretty to go ahead and add those leaves as if they were tendrils growing around the little hearts. And I'll complete that off camera, but at the end of the video you'll see how I will finish this page. And there's that magnetic closure, super easy to use, and you can cover it up with the little tabs available in a Trove of locks. And this completes our second page. Now let's move on to the third, using the sliding photo pockets. So this one was a lot of fun to use. I'll only be using, I think it's one on this book, So I've gone ahead and traced it onto paper, as I had mentioned before, and I'll be using that paper as the insert. I did cut it down very slightly from the original size, and I also think I shabbied the edges a tiny little bit. But here I'm using misty gray ink. I thought this very light gray, it's actually from Pink Fresh Studio, would match this perfectly. And I'm using a Nuvo dauber to apply that ink all the way around. So if you're wondering about color combinations that you can use in this memory book with the vintage vignettes, any shade of gray will do. So you can go from the very lightest to all the way to the darkest, and it's going to look just fine. In fact, you can do a lot of different combinations. And of course, if you prefer pinks or roses, then any deep rose will work with this. There are ladies in the Tonic Studios group that are wonderful about sharing the color combinations that they use if you want to use classic card as well. But if you have any questions, feel free to reach out and I'll share any number of combinations that you need, depending on the colors you like, of course. So here you're seeing me take just a strip of card here to protect the background. I am taking a stamp from Tonic Studios, and I'll write the name of it down below in the description area, but it does create this crackle finish. And if you notice, this Trove of Locks comes with a die that creates that very same texture, so I thought it would be fun to use that die. And I'm also using, I believe the color is Platinum mousse here, and I'm just very gently applying that onto the paper after having stamped it. And this just gave me a perfect finish to this. That mousse is a silver platinum color, however it does have that kind of gray look to it, and I really enjoyed using it. In fact, I'll be using this color combination of gray and platinum in this book in all of the little keys, and all I did was color a background piece of paper using those different inks, the gray inks and also the crackle stamp and that platinum mousse. So that way later when you see the keys, you'll see that color combination. But I love the way that that turned out, but I wanted to add a little tiny pop of color here at the bottom. So what I did is that I took a piece of card and I ripped it, as you can see there. Super easy crafting, no measuring, and just you eyeball the portion of paper you want to use, rip it apart, and then adhere it onto whichever embellishment you're creating. I think it's so much fun to craft this way. It's very relaxing, by the way. And here I have another marker. I'm sorry, this is a Nuvo marker, and it is again in the grays, so you can go ahead and pick out whichever color you prefer. And I love that it has a chisel tip, because then you can add ink to the edges of your paper and it'll give that subtle shadow that you may need depending on where you're placing your ephemera or your embellishments. And also you can get into those little corners as you see there, so it will look as if this came that way, if you will. And I really enjoyed using this on this paper, so that way I could really give it a nice finish. Now, of course, I should have done that before I applied that strip of paper at the bottom, but it's of no consequence because no one's going to see that portion anyway. Now moving along, this is the largest matting die. I've taken a piece of card and folded it, as you can see there, and ran it through my die cutting machine after having folded it by overlapping that one side of the die so that it would not cut the fold. And this gave me a little portion there that I can adhere onto my page. I flipped that page over to the other side and then used the opposite edge, so that way I could get that beautiful beveled edge to that paper. And what's wonderful about these dies is I think of them as if they were a nice pair of scissors. I position the paper in the way that I want to, and that way I can get several different combinations and sizes of pages for memory books. But we're going to add another little lock here. In this case, you're going to cut this portion out. If you see the lines there, follow them to add the folds onto this paper. So you're going to be folding all of them very gently because they are very subtle. So here is what you want to achieve. I wanted to show you a close-up of that. This is important because you're going to be feeding a little key through there. So that's how you want to fold this one piece of paper. The larger tabs that you see there that I'm pointing out will adhere onto your page. The second one that you'll want to be cutting out is this portion here, and you're going to be folding it for the center portion along those little fold lines, and also making sure that you can adhere it as if you were curling it around. This is going to fit this larger key, and this is going to create the lock for this particular page. There's also the singular rectangle that you'll also need to cut out. First, I'm going to add the actual page portion here. That's going to be the one that will lock. So as you saw there, I just cut the little tabs at 45-degree angles, and this is super simple. Just adhere it onto the side of your matting layer, and I'll fold that over and tack it down, and it's going to measure perfectly because I used the same die as I had used for that large matting layer. So that's going to open toward the right, and it is important that you use this so that it opens toward the opening of the page also. Now you can gauge here the distance on the page onto which you want to add this little lock. And as you see here, that solid rectangle has to adhere to the bottom matting layer. And this is also going to make sense once I start adhering it, but here you only want to add adhesive on the back portion of this where you had created that little fold, and also the two little outer portions that create almost like a letter C, and that adheres onto that solid little rectangle. So you'll see immediately how you can fit the key right in there. So that's what's important, is that you allow that little opening there. Once you're comfortable with that, of course, you can then adhere the second portion, but you want to match these up so that way the key can fit into both openings. So if you line them up as you see here, then you'll be able to fit that key through. Now you can add your adhesive onto the tab, attach that onto the page that will be moving, add adhesive to the back of the little rectangle that you used. That goes onto the base page. And I test it over and over just to make sure it's lining up perfectly. And once you're happy with that, of course, you can open it and then add adhesive to the back little portion there. It looks like a letter T. And this closes up nicely. And then you can push them back a little bit with your fingers just to maintain the integrity of the little folds that you had created. So that's easy enough, and now I'm going to be adding that little photo insert to the right hand side on this page. This is going to go on the base, as you see there. And now you have room on the left-hand side to decorate on that page. So I've taken this rectangular die and cut out several pieces, and there's also the little matting layer. As you can see there on the left-hand side, I've also used the die to cut the little openings into the pages. So you can cut as many of these as you would like. Once you add the matting layer, you can add the ribbon to close this off and tie it together to create a little notebook. I've taken a piece of chili red 3mm wide ribbon and a needle with a large eye, and depending on where you want to end your little ribbon so that you can tie it off, that's exactly where you will start threading the ribbon. And this will make sense in a moment, but I'm starting at the top because I want to end up at the top. And it's simple and easy to use. You just start threading from the back of the little notebook toward the front, all the way down to the bottom. And then you're going to walk your way back with that needle using the ribbon, and just make sure that you position it so that it's nice and flat, and also avoiding the prior ribbon that you have already placed there so that you don't accidentally sew through it. And that's as easy as that. It's just like using shoelaces. So I'm going to position this nicely all the way to the top, and then that will allow me to feed that ribbon again right back out on the top of this little notebook. And once I have that, I can go ahead and tie a knot here, so that way I can finish this off. So just a little square knot here will do. And now that I have that secure, I can tie a little bow and embellish this further so that I can use it in the memory book. If you would like to, you can also add a little tiny drop of hot glue right in the center of that bow if you're concerned about it coming apart. I'll just be cutting this down so that the tails are equal on both sides, and I'll be adding this onto the memory book. But as you can see, it's super easy to create this little type of notebook. This will now go onto the page, and to add it, I'll be using the photo corners. There's two different ones. There's one with a straight edge. I'll be using the one with the curved edge because it matches the insert shape. I did cut it out twice, once in ivory card, and the other one I cut out with chili red card. As you can see there, I'm going to be cutting away a portion of it, so both of the tabs, and also a portion of the edge, so that way this will fit as a matting layer onto that little photo corner. So it's as simple as that. And now this will be that pretty colorful layer on here. And these have the two little tabs on the bottom, so I just positioned them first to make sure that I had the correct distance that I would need. And this is just a narrow little embellishment on a page, but that way it won't compete with the opening and closing of that page with the key. So once you have that position, and of course you can use a little ruler to help you, then you can add the little notebook right onto your page. To further embellish the little notebook, I've taken a little dragonfly that I happen to have in my stash, and using the same metallic embellishment mousse, I'm just using a small brush to color that. That would have been otherwise a brown woodsy kind of color. And I'm also using a dual dot marker from Tonic Studios. These come in a pack of 3, and I'm using one of the gold tone ones. There also is a darker gold and also a kind of a dark gray color, and this will be added right to the front of the little notebook. So you can see the color contrast there. So don't forget that you can use your embellishment mousse on a number of different types of medium, whether it be a soft wood, any kind of items that you have. And case in point here, I'm using it on the edges of the foundation papers. This was the ivory cardstock. As you can see there, I do test a number of different colors, but I'm using a technique that I would normally use on walls actually, and that is to take a rag and just dip it onto that mousse to create some texture. It'll end up looking a little bit like stucco, and it's only for the edges, but I had a lot of fun just crafting and using those mousses in different colors. And again, I'll list them below, but that's how I'll be doing the base pages so that they're not plain white, and also they will match the little inserts a little bit better because they have a little bit of that shabby look to them. So if you like this type of technique, you just mix and match any colors that you like. I do have a gray in the background, and then I've added the lighter color mousse on top, then dipped it with a paper towel. And for our next page, we'll be using the Photo Cascade wallets. Again, that came with 2. As you can see there on the left-hand side, I have inked it already using some metallic inks, and I've taken this strip die from the Trove of Locks, and I've cut out a strip of card and also the little portion that will allow it to insert. And here, what I wanted to point out, of course, is that you want to get this used to folding. And also, I've taken the actual insert, and after burnishing all of those folds, as you see there, I added the ink on the edges. And now I'm going to be showing you how to, of course, add this to your page using those 2 little leg portions there, but the portion there that moves, you can decorate if you would like to. This is just going to wrap right around the back of that larger rectangle. And you want to make sure that whatever embellishments or anything you use will allow that to move, and that will be useful with the foam adhesive that I'll show you in a moment. But here I've traced it onto this pretty card to allow myself to decorate just that one portion on the back. And that's not going to impede anything from moving. So you can see there the little layout that I've chosen for this paper. And what I'll do is to use this little belt that you can cut out using the dies as the portion that's going to allow me to pull that rectangular portion on the back. So if you see there, there's that little slit back there. You can add it into the slit if you would like to, or just simply adhere it to that rectangular portion, whichever one is more comfortable. I also took another little rectangle here, and I just thought this would look pretty on that background, so I'm just adhering it there, and that's about 2 or maybe 1 3/4 inches wide, but this is just a decorative portion. I'll be cutting away the top and bottom that I don't need here. And again, this is just decorative. It has nothing to do with the actual insert, but I thought it would look really cute. And here is going to be the placement. Now, it is important that you lift this up off the page a little bit because of this being kinetic, as I had mentioned earlier. So I am using quite a thick foam here. I was out of my foam squares from Tonic Studios, so that's why I'm using this rolled foam. But there you saw the placement of that foam, and now what I'm going to do is sandwich that little strip right in that little portion there instead of using ribbon. So if you would like to, you can definitely use a piece of ribbon instead, but I'm simply going to position this little strip here. And if you want to, you can cut it out twice, of course, and use a heavier cardstock for the background to go ahead and attach it on the back. That way it'll be nice and sturdy. But now I'm simply placing that rectangle right on top, and it'll hide that little strip. Just make sure it's nice and perpendicular to the page so it looks good. So you can use a grid on your table if you happen to have one to help you with that placement. And that little slider portion I'll be decorating later, but this is just a very basic construction. Just make sure it doesn't surpass the edge of your page when you're adding this, of course. So you do want to be mindful of your placement on the left and right hand side of your page. Make sure you pull those little straps around, and I'm taking off the carrier sheet of that adhesive and adding a little bit more Nuvo Deluxe adhesive right on top of that foam. And now this is simply going to go right on that page. So it's actually a really simple addition to a page, but it does add quite a bit of impact when you see all of the little photos inside there. It's just so cute. You now want to be mindful, however, of how you decorate this page, because you don't want it to compete with the opening on the left hand side. Be sure to also burnish this one more time, and I think that bears repeating because you want this to be able to move on your page here, as you can see there, without competing with any layers or anything like that. So that's what I'm doing here, is I'm making sure that I test all of the folds. The last portion there you will not see. So what's important is that you see the little photo frames only, and then you can locate the little areas on the outer perimeter of your page to decorate, and that way you can use that little insert. Now moving on to the hanging photo strips. This also has 4 little spaces there for you to add a photo. You can add them onto the page by placing them inside of this portion here, making sure you adhere them individually, and closing that off with more adhesive. Once you have that all tacked down, that's when you can feed this through, and you want to make sure that you do that before you add this to your page. I just think that because of the thicknesses of different papers, you should test that out. So I'm again working with the largest matting layer of the Trove of Blocks. What I've done is that I've taken a piece of cardstock and I folded it this time horizontally. So if you see the smaller page die there, I took the cardstock, folded it, placed the die on the fold so that it surpassed the fold and didn't cut it away, and I was able to get this portion here, and I did cut away the portion on this side that would have otherwise had those little holes. I did cut that portion away, so I just had a top folding page with the pretty little corners on the bottom. I'm going to be decorating this with the second matting layer that you can cut. If you would like to, you can add a second one on the back. But this is where I'll be placing the film strip. And this is how I'll be adding this to this page. The way that I'll be locking this page is by using these longer strips that you can cut out. I cut them out of the chili red card using the decorative layer, and then those will go on top of the longer strip. Now on one end it does not cut, so I placed that onto a piece of ivory card that I had embellished with some mousse, as you see there. And you see the portion that didn't cut out is actually wider, so you can actually keep cutting this down if you would like to. But what I want you to see here is that it's the full length. And again, I'm just going back because the second one still needed some mousse, so I'll be decorating that. And my mousse had solidified, so I added a little bit of water there. And if you can tell, it's looking a little chunky, but it still works. So if you have any questions about that, let me know. You just need a little water and a little glycerin, and you can reconstitute your mousses, so don't give up. But in any case, these two strips are going to lock our page. And once you have those ready to go, you'll then be able to adhere the top folding page that you've created with the medium-sized die, and just adhere this along that long horizontal tab to the back of your matting layer. And you can tell that I do burnish that. Make sure it's positioned nicely on there, and I did have a moment there to position that a little bit better, so I did want that to be as close to the fold line as possible there. And now the matting layer will go right on top, and these strips are going to help lock it onto the page. I did cut away a tiny little portion extended beyond the fold line there so that it wouldn't show the background. And as you can tell, I am using low tack adhesive to tack that down onto the page as I plan this. And because I will be decorating this a little bit further off camera, I did decide on the placement of the second one to be right behind the first insert. But of course you always want to make sure that you don't have too much bulk on your page. And as you see here, I am using the grid on my table to position this so that I know exactly how far up on that page I want the tab to be. And once I have that exactly where I want it, I can just open this, unfold it, add the adhesive, and now tack that onto the back of the matting layer. So that is why I left that portion to be so wide, is because I wanted that nice heavy foundation. And there you can see that I'm measuring the height. So you can place this to be about 2 1/4 or 2 3/4 away from the bottom of your page if you like. And here you see a little bit clearer how I was able to cut away the portion that I didn't want to show. And I love using low tack adhesive from Tonic Studios because it really helps to position items on a page without too much effort. And here again, I am tacking the next one down. And this is going to be nice and perfectly positioned on my page. Now you will need 2 magnets to complete this page. One of them you can place on the uppermost tab here, or I should call this a belt because it is one of the little belt-like features of this memory book collection. The second magnet you need to match, and of course you want to hide that on the back of the page, so just have it match the first one and then tack it down with double-sided adhesive, and you can now decorate this, and this decoration is going to cover the magnet. So again, I've used chili red cardstock from Tonic Studios, and that is the Craft Perfect cardstock that measures weighs 80 pounds. So it is nice and sturdy, and if you need to cover any magnets, then it's a good weight paper to do so without adding too much bulk. Now there's this buckle portion, and I could have tried to feed that layer through it, but when I saw that it didn't fit, I just decided to add it right on top. And it was a little bit of an afterthought. However, I don't mind the way that it looks when I adhere it right on top here. You could cut the paper to try to fit it as if it were a belt coming through the other side, but I just left it nice and simple, and I don't think it looks bad. Because these dies, of course, you use them as you like, so whatever preference you have is how you can add them onto your page. And now I'm adding the second matting layer here. The floral papers are absolutely gorgeous, but I wanted to highlight the darker red, and that's why I chose this paper here. Once I had that prepared, I moved on to the insert, and here I took another rub-on. It said road trips and happy hearts. So I did rub that on there, positioning the ampersand exactly where it would be seen on the center portion of that insert. And once I had that ready, I was able to, of course, position this on the page. But you want to be careful when you're transferring these so you get the entire image placed on your page. Now I wanted to add a little bit more color to this, and I grabbed a brush that I had already used on a different insert, and this has some metallic paint still on the brush. It's very subtle. It's not a whole lot. It's more of a dry brush technique if anything, but I did add that subtle bit of gray onto this. Off camera, however, I did take the Nuvo glue pen. I drew around the perimeter of this piece, and I did use some gold embossing powder. And I'm sorry that I didn't include that in this video, but I was trying to meet a deadline, so I wasn't able to show every single aspect of it, but at the end I will describe, of course, what I've done. Here's the second insert. I'm adding this on the inside of that page, as I had mentioned earlier. And that will fold closed. And it's not so heavy so as to create any kind of buckling. That's something that I always look for when I'm adding embellishments onto a page. This is quite simple, and that completes this page for now. Moving on to the very last page of this memory book. This is going to be the lock portion of this tutorial. So this is the one where you can cut out two pieces using the larger square-ish looking die here. So one of the edges does not cut, and I've covered this already, but you want to make sure that you position it on your paper so that you have an extended piece that will reach the very edge of your matting layer. And again, I'm using the very largest matting layer available in this collection. So cut that out twice, and as you can tell, I have already embellished it using the mousse. I'll be using this key here, and I'm going to show you the dies. There's the smaller oval die, and you want to cut that out twice. The key I have cut out 4 times because I will be layering it. The uppermost piece is the one that I embellished. The 3 others will simply stack behind. So I wanted that to be nice and sturdy. These 2 pieces here are key for this page. One of them has an outer cutting layer, or is able to cut the outer border. You want to cut that out 4 times. And the other one simply cuts the center. That's the one that's going to create the groove onto which you'll be able to fit your key. However, you want to use that piece there with the circles and cut it out once. It's going to cut a large circle and then 3 smaller ones. And I'll show you in a moment how to put those together. So you have your matting layers as well. And I wanted to mention that because this is not an exact square, to be conscious of that when you place it on your paper, so that if there is an image that you want in a particular place, that you don't accidentally cut it in the wrong position. So I did accidentally adhere that on the back, but I just went ahead and wiped off the adhesive, and I'll be using matting layers here, so that's no big deal. But I wanted those flowers to be in a particular position there, and that just reminded me to mention it to you because you want to mat your layers, I think, in my personal opinion, before you cut into the paper, and you'll see why. So there are the two matting layers I'll be using, and those two pages need to overlap. That's the only way you're going to be able to really lock them into position. So the first thing that I'm going to do is take a pencil and mark the position of all of these little pieces. The first one here is this rectangular portion that's actually going to go on the very top of both of these pieces of paper. That's where the key will fit in, but I'm using this as a guide of where I'm going to actually place the die. I've gone ahead and marked the fold lines on the outer edge first. I've used a low tack piece of adhesive to hold the two pieces together, and now I'm going to take this rectangular die that only cuts the center portion. I'm just going to tack that down, and I'm going to run this through my die cutting machine. You want it to overlap so that it extends beyond the page by a tiny little bit, and that's what I was showing you there. So make sure that that's nice and secure. And this is a personal preference, of course, but I am going to run them both through at the same time. You don't have to do it this way. You can go back and mark it again with a pencil, but you'll see why I've done it in this manner. This cut through the topmost layer, and you see that there, but it also marked the second page, or the second piece of paper there. So I'm able to remove the portion that cut away, and now I have the groove mark where I'm going to position the same die again, and it just creates a bit of a channel. So I'm going to cut that a second time. That way I get the position exactly where I want it. So if it bothers you, of course, you can just trace it, but these two will match perfectly now. And I'll be covering the sides and also the matting layers on the back. So if you see there, these matting layers that are ivory card, I actually did go ahead and mark them with a pencil, as you see, with that little groove line, and then I used the die, I cut them again. But now what we're going to do is fold this piece of card along the tick marks that I had marked on the front, so that way I know exactly how to position them on the page. One of the sides is going to be a little bit wider than the other, but that's of no consequence. It's going to look pretty. So you determine, of course, if you want this to be a little bit further to the right or left. Depending on which memory book, in fact, you're using this on, you may actually use this on an entirely different shaped page. But what matters is that you get the gist of how to use the dies. So again, these will overlap one over the other, and I like to tack them down, flip the page over, and then adhere these along the sides. So I'll be using both of them, and then burnishing that with the paper creaser. So this is now ready. All I have to do is cover the little portions on top. So remember, the die cuts the full rectangle, so now you position it where you know you need this, and you're going to need to cut off the little portion on top so that the key can be inserted on the page. Once you've marked that on this little rectangle portion, you can cut away that little piece that you don't need, and then cut all of the other ones in the same fashion. You see 3 here, but I will be doing this a total of 4 times to secure the front and back of each one of these. And now you'll be adhering these to the very top, making sure that the little channels match the die cut. So I am using the paper creaser there to burnish that and make sure that it adheres fully. But you're going to see here in a moment when I put this all together that I recommend you use any type of little paper clips or clothespins to hold this down fully as it dries. And that's because there's a little bit of bulk that's created, of course, with all of these layers, and it's not a whole lot, but you want this to be able to feed nicely when you add the key. So as that is drying, then of course you want it to lay as flat as possible. So if you want to, of course you could just lay something heavy on top. Here I'm adhering the layers of the key, and those were cut out of 300 GSM cardstock. So I did do 3 layers of the 300 GSM, and then the 4th layer on top is the one that I had colored using the Nuvo embellishment mousse and the stamp. That gave me that beautiful metallic finish. It looks like an actual key. Now these oval portions here, the ones that you would have cut out twice, do have 2 fold lines. I'm using my paper creaser to press the paper onto that blunt edge, and that way I'm able to get the fold exactly as I need it. It needs to look like a letter C, and you need that opening. However, you also need the folds. So once you have them both folded, you're going to take the straight portion and adhere these two together back to back. So one facing opposite to the other. Apply your adhesive in the center line there and adhere both of those. And you want this to be completely dry. Now, using the key, you're going to take the little circle stack and that little portion that you had adhered together. Apply a little drop of adhesive on the back, making sure that the openings face the outer sides of the key and that the fold line in the center is perpendicular to the center of the key as well. Now adhere your little circle stacks. So there's the 3 smaller ones, and then there's the larger one. The smaller ones need to be adhered to the very center of the larger one. And you may want to hold that until it dries. But these will now adhere to the very back of that little portion you had created. And it needs to be very centered and as flat as you can possibly adhere this also. I am using 300 GSM cardstock for all of this, and what I would recommend here is that because these pieces of paper are small, you want them to be able to feed into this page nicely. Then you want to also hold on to that until it dries. And what I found to be the easiest way to go about it was to take some reversible or reverse tweezers is what they call them. These tweezers you can let go of and they'll still hold on to your paper, and I happen to have several, so I just took them and used them to hold on to that paper until it dried, and in the meantime I'll be decorating the outer portions of that. And now you can see that that key is actually going to feed into this page very nicely, and I'm going to show you the top portion here. It was difficult to do it on camera, so I'm simply going to show you that the little channel in the center is actually going to allow that little stack of circles to fit behind that channel. You can of course decorate the top of the key, but the portions on the 2 sides are what going to feed into the channels created by the way that you constructed the key. So the very topmost portion there is what I was suggesting that you hold down with the little pegs or clothespins. That way that portion will dry nice and flat, and then when you go to feed the key into your page, it will slide in very nicely. So here I'm going to take it away so that you see what I'm referring to. Those are the 2 channels that you created on either side of that key, and the stack of circles again will create the little bit of cushioning between the pages, if that makes any sense. So there's the back of our book, and now we can start putting this together. However, I want to decorate the very first page, and this is the first time that I'm actually going to be doing an interactive cover to a mini album, so I'm quite happy about this. This is the smaller strip that you can cut out using the dies included in this collection, and I have cut out 2. Then I am using this magnetic insert, and I'm also using the smaller die that will allow me to feed the little strips through that little buckle portion. So what I'm going to do first, however, is after cutting those 2 strips and determining how I'm going to be placing this onto my page, I'm also going to use this smaller little rectangle. This cuts an aperture into your page, and the 2 little strips are going to feed through those little apertures. So I'm positioning the photo wallet first so that I know exactly where I'm going to be cutting into that background matting layer. And you can see there, you can use a ruler if you would like to, so you can mark the bottom portion there where the second aperture should cut out as well. So I will be running this through my die cutting machine twice. So I do double check first before I do any cutting into the paper. But once you're happy with the positioning of that and you have plenty of room all the way around, then you can go ahead and cut into this using that die. And here I'm going to decorate the little wallet. As you can see there, I've already gone ahead and added some papers. I added one of the rub-ons using the smaller matting layer that comes with the very smallest little square die in your set. I had not used this on any of the other pages, but I decided to use that matting layer. And then I went ahead and traced this just as I did all of the other ones. I cut away the pieces of paper I wanted to use, and I also used the dual dot marker that has that wider nib to go ahead and color all of the channels there on the outer edges of this paper, as well as the inner borders for every single one. Then using a Nuvo marker, I went ahead and colored the top portion there, and now I'm going to use the adhesive pen to go ahead and add a little bit more embellishment to this. And what I'm doing is just strategically placing the adhesive, and then I'm going to use a very small strip of gold foil to press onto that adhesive so that I get that beautiful shine on that paper. And this is again just to show you some options on how you can really make these just match your project exactly the way that you want it. I am one that I love texture, I love shine, I like to add a little bit of everything to my projects just to make them unique and make them in the style that I prefer. Of course, the papers will determine a lot of what I use. These papers are quite vintage, but they're very bohemian or rustic, so there's quite a bit that you can do with them, and I just allowed myself to be inspired by all of the textures that I saw in the background. So that's exactly what I'm doing here. I am not trying to be precise in any way. I love the way that that got all nice and messy with the gold foil, because that's exactly what I was going for. That glue was still quite a bit wet, and as you see there, I just spread it around with my fingers and then burnish it so that I can get the foil exactly where I want that. Now at the end, I decided that that cream color marker was a little bit on the light side and I wanted a bit more depth to that, so I will be going back with some oxide ink to color that envelope a little bit more. But I want to show you the construction. Now I had mentioned the smaller rectangle, and now I'm also going to be using the larger rectangle in the die set. The smaller one is the one that you want to use to cut the little holes or apertures onto your page. And the larger one I used in conjunction with the smaller one to create a little frame around it. So there you see I'm pointing out how I cut into the page. Now that larger one, I did cut out the large rectangle first, and then once I cut out the 2 rectangles, I went back with the smaller one and cut into them. That's how I was able to achieve those little frames. And they're a little bit topsy-turvy, but I'm not worried about that. I think they kind of look cute. This doesn't need to be 100% precise. It's just a matter of having fun. But this is going to layer on the very front of my memory book. So I want to make it look nice. And what I'm going to do is that I'm going to position another piece of cardstock behind those little apertures so that you don't see the ivory cardstock. Again, I wanted to use this paper because it's a beautiful paper and it's also nice and heavy in weight, and I'm referring to the ivory card. However, because the papers are a little bit darker, that's why I went ahead and used the mousse and everything. So there you saw me position two pieces of cardstock. They're going to hide behind those two little apertures. I tacked them down with low tack adhesive or low tack tape, added the little bit of glue behind them, and now I'm able to add them to the background. And here's the strip. There's that little belt loop. You can add the little buckle and then feed the two pieces of paper through as if it were a real belt. Now I did cut that little buckle out at least 4 times out of 300 GSM paper. The topmost layer I did embellish with some mousse, and now you can see how easily you can feed these through so that you can position those little belts exactly where you want them. Once I have the placement, I'll be feeding the other two ends of those little belts into the apertures that I cut out of that paper. Of course, what's important here is that I'm leaving enough room for this to hold on to that magnetic wallet. So here I'm adding adhesive to those loop ends or belt ends, however you want to call that. I'm pulling on snugly onto those and then flipping that over, making sure that that little wallet fits right inside. And there is a magnet on the back here, or I'm sorry, I'll be positioning a magnet on the back. My apologies, I said that wrong. So I'm adding the little magnet here, so that way when I feed this onto that page, it doesn't slip out. So I'm adding that first magnet onto the little wallet and then the second one behind the page. That's going to help anchor this so that it doesn't fall out every time that I open and close the book. And those little leftover rectangles that fall out of those apertures, depending on the paper that you may have used, you may want to save those. I'm just showing you that you could definitely use those as if they were little bricks on the background of an embellishment or your page, so it doesn't have to go to waste. But now that I've anchored those little magnets, I'm going to go ahead and add this matting layer to the front of the book. And you can tell that I've already cut down the outer edge there because all of these will now match perfectly. And I'm going to show you the special binding that I decided to use on this memory book. I have a couple of other books that I've done in this style, and I'm super excited to share it again with you today. It's been a couple of years, I think now, since I shared the other masterclass on how to bind a book in this manner, so I'm going to share it again for those of you who may be new to the channel or have never seen this type of binding. But the first thing that you want to do is secure all of your matting layers onto all of the base pages, and I'm recommending this spatula from Nuvo. It is a lifesaver. You can see how quickly I'm able to add that matting layer onto the background precisely and very smooth by using that. It comes, I think, in a pack of 3 or 2, so you can grab those from Tonic Studios. It makes it super easy, and you could tell I already had the front page added to what will be the inner page of this book as well. And here I'm adding more brown because I wanted to darken this up. I had mentioned this earlier, but I actually even went back and added some Ranger oxide ink, and it gave me a spectacular finish. I was so excited once it was all done. Now we're almost done here. We're going to take a piece of twine. This happens to be gray twine. I'm starting with the back of the book, so it's the very last page and the very bottom-most little entry point there. And I am going to be adding a bead behind every single page or in between each. So I'm attaching the bead, then the page, threading through that twine, so that every time that I add a page, I'm adding another little glass bead in between. This is going to create space between the pages, and then when I reach my very first page, I'm also going to add one more bead. Now I'm going to work my way back in the opposite direction, and I will be doing this for all of these pages, all the way from the bottom to the top, alternating the color of beads. Of course, you could use all the same color and any size bead that you find to be comfortable. I believe these are 6mm. If anything, the larger size would be 8mm beads, but I do think these are 6mm wide. What I think is most important, of course, is that you find a wide-eyed needle that you can use, and I tend to buy these in a large pack. And what's important is that they do fit the size of the little hole in the beads. The other thing is that you want to pull, as you see me doing here, on that twine, if you see that, so that those beads are all equidistant and that there is no gap between the twine and your pages. So this is going to take a little bit of back and forth here. You want to remove any of the embellishments that may be moving about on your book, and I want to show you there. Again, you're starting from the back, working your way forward, and it's going to be, once you get into a rhythm, it's going to be quite easy. You just want to make sure that you don't accidentally tangle your twine, but it's going to be page, bead, etc., etc. And what you'll do is make sure that you match the beads the way that you find them to look nice. As you see here, I'm using a rose color bead and also some white ones, and they are faceted. I think they're absolutely darling, and this is how I'm going to be binding this book. It's just another alternative. It's a type of Coptic stitching that has been around for hundreds of years, so I did not invent this. However, I had not particularly seen any books bound this way on the internet as far as tutorials were concerned, and I'm a very huge fan of different types of binding, so I decided to bring this along a couple of years ago. I did share a live tutorial on how to do this. In fact, I have another Tonic Studios memory book that I added this type of binding to, and I was so happy with it that I decided to repeat that here. So I'll be stitching this all the way up, and in a moment we'll skip to the end so that you see how I finish this. But if you have any questions on this or anything else that you've seen here today, feel free to reach out, and you can either email me at paintsandglitter@gmail.com, or you can leave a comment below and I'll try to respond as soon as possible, and that way I can clear up any questions that you might have regarding this. But this has been a lot of fun. This tutorial was fun to make by adding all of these wonderful inserts from Tonic Studios. They are absolutely darling, and I absolutely love that you can really personalize them to your projects. So here you see how I have added those beads so far, and it really doesn't take too long, but I'll be back in a moment with the rest. So that way you can see how this looks when it's entirely finished, but I absolutely adore this look, especially with the alternate colors. So here's the very top. I've gone ahead and threaded all of the beads here. So once you get to the end, you have an option here. Actually, you have quite a few. You can either thread this all the way back through and end up at the bottom again, or you can pull that twine that's at the bottom and have it meet the top. That's what I'll be doing today. And that way you can secure the twine by just creating a square knot. So that's what I'll be doing here. I'm just cutting away the tails and making sure that this fits exactly the way that I want it. But you want to hold this taut, and what I wanted to point out here is that there are absolutely no gaps in between the twine and the background of this page. It's really important that if you are going to be doing this type of binding, that you use a twine that's going to allow you to thread the beads without knotting, without fraying, and also that you can secure it with a really good knot at the very end. So this is cotton twine, but I'll be separating the little tails after I'm done with this and adding a few more beads, and this completes this project. So now I'm going to show you how this all ends up. Okay, so I have just finished this book and I decided to omit any kind of sentiment from the front. Number one, because it does say memories on the paper here, and I really like the subtlety of that. But also because I'm thinking if someone decides to order this from me, and I often do sell my books, then I can of course alter the front and then add the sentiment of their choice. But what I've done here is, as you can see, is I finished adorning the front here, and I did use some little birdie flowers that I got from Tonic Studios US. I've gone ahead and added some little findings that I have in my stash, and then the lace front here, and on the little envelope, which I, by the way, finished distressing with walnut stain oxide. That's what I did add to the top here to make it look more rusty. And I'm so happy with the results, because if you remember, it started off as white paper. To get it to look like this is just, for me, just wonderful. And of course I did the gold gilding on here just with foil and the Nuvo glue pen. And then I added a little flower here, which, by the way, all of the flowers, the mulberry flowers here, came in just a matte color, and they were looking pretty dull to my eye, so I did take one of the Mica Mist sprays, and this is an Aspen Gold, and I keep this on my desk always, all the gold. Keep them on my desk because I love this product from Nuvo. It's one of my favorites, and I just dipped into it with a watercolor brush and just went at it, just coloring all the little flowers, and you can see the little glimmer that it adds to them. It's subtle, but it's just so beautiful. I did also add a little dollop of adhesive here to make this little buckle stay with the strap, and added another piece of ephemera from the collection. It just looks like this beautiful postcard, and it matched so much with this background that I did flip it over. And then just another piece of ephemera from my stash. It happens to be a little Baroque frame. So this, of course, magnetizes here. This now will hold on to this, and it's got that beautiful look of having been tied on here at the last minute, right before your voyage. And we've got all of our little beads on the spine. That was a lot of fun. At the end, I did separate the twine and added individual beads to the ends, and then I did add this little strand of pearls back here. I just think it's a nice little surprise there. And let's do a walkthrough of what this looks like now when you open it, because this is what's really fun about this type of binding, is that you then have the gems there in the center. I did add a little more here and there. I changed this. I wasn't happy with how it looked, so I just added a strip of paper, a ribbon, and a piece of twine. I think I left this be. I think I may have added the little twine bow here. I added the little charm and the flowers. Then over here I did add some seam binding to the key just so that I could find it. And I did alter the dragonfly a little more. I did heat emboss it with a little bit of gold, and then added some little ephemera and flowers here. The tiny pink ones are from little Birdie, and the little white one is from Renee Bouquets, as well as the, I think that's it. And I do have some little strings here I have to clean off. I'm trying to recall. Okay, so there's a little pocket back here. So I did add another piece of ephemera. I love this image there, and I didn't want to let it go. And that was the perfect little placement for that. And another little frame, of course, because you can never have too many of those. And if you recall, this does open, and it's got this space here. So I did add another page, and this is easy enough. I just cut it the same way we cut the initial one, only this time out of vellum. And then I added adhesive by using the double-sided adhesive, which looks like this. Then I just added the little strip right behind that portion, and because it is that dry adhesive, it doesn't leave any markings there. You just get the shadow, which is fine. And of course I can still add anything back here. it doesn't impede that. And this is that pearlescent vellum from Tonic Studios. All of the materials here are from Tonic with the exception of the flowers and some of the other little embellishments. So here I did add a piece of Y lace that I had in my stash. That's from Renee Bouquets. And then I added some little pearls to this portion here. I did back this up again with another little strip cut with the same exact die, only it's the 300 GSM. And here I added a tiny bit of gold onto that silver and little gems along this side, which I did use 2 corner dies. These are from Tonic Studios and they're from a long time ago, from the designer series that they had, and I loved those dies. So they're so delicate and pretty. The one thing that I'm going to advise, however, is that when you have any moving parts in a book, be careful of your placement. For instance, I should have probably moved this little butterfly a little bit higher there, but this is as far as that's going to go on this end. And on this end, I did adhere this very flat, because if not, the paper was going to catch on there. So be mindful of that. And I know I mentioned the height of it. You do want some foam adhesive behind that. Over here, oh, I added a little bit of shine to the little envelopes there with a jelly roll pen. And over here, I did heat emboss the edges of this portion here by using some gold embossing powder and the Nuvo glue pen. On the inside, I added a little more. So on the top here, I added a piece of lace, 2 photo corners with just a piece of vellum, and then I adhered that postcard from the paper collection onto the background. And here I did stamp onto this one using some really light ink, and it's actually ink that's meant for no line coloring. But I did use one of the strips from the collection of stamps that I had shown in the beginning of the tutorial. And then I also used the dual dot marker that I mentioned, and that one is in the color Platinum Gold along the edges here. I use this quite a bit actually on this book, so you may notice it here and there. And lastly here on this page, I just added some lace on these 2 sides. And I think that's all I did. Off camera I also added the photo corners, which I did cut out in vellum. So this is a very basic version of this book. I know that there was a lot more that I could have shown, but because of time constraints, I wanted to finish. And I do hope that it serves as some inspiration for you, that maybe there's a technique you may have learned. If you have questions, leave them in the comments down below. I'll be happy to respond. Don't forget to watch the other tutorials available with this collection. And I know that Jody was on Hobby Maker showing the inserts, but I do believe that Tonic Studios UK is going to have it on their page, quite possibly, if they haven't already done so. In any case, if you're new to my channel, don't forget to subscribe, leave a thumbs up, and come back for more tutorials, whether it be for Tonic Studios or the other companies I'm affiliated with. And as I always say, I do hope that you can be inspired and be blessed. And if you'd like to, I do have links in the description box of my video should you feel compelled to shop. It would support my channel and I'd be eternally grateful. Ciao, ciao.